magic with metaphors that we're going to be covering. Now, I have cheated slightly because I've called it magic with metaphors, but when I'm saying magic with metaphors, I also mean similes, analogies, because it's not just metaphors. And before we got started, I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. If we're taking just the word metaphor, what is a simile? What's an analogy? Because it's about 30 odd years since I did A-level English. And I was just thinking, hang on a minute, somebody's going to ask me, isn't this an analogy? And I thought, for the life of me, I can't remember what the difference is between an analogy and a metaphor. So I've done the digging around, I've looked it up, and I've got this to share with you. So first of all, a metaphor is saying something that's not literally applicable to something else. So for example, if you say something's the icing on the cake, it's not literally the icing on the cake, unless you are, of course, talking about icing on a cake. So that is a metaphor. However, if you are watching Forrest Gump and he is saying, my mama always said life is like a box of chocolates, that's a simile. So whenever the word like is used, that's your cue and your clue to know that it's a simile. But then I started to get interested because they were talking about analogies being when there's an explanatory point. And I was thinking, well, actually, he did go on to say, you never know what you're going to get. So actually, it's a simile that becomes an analogy. So the difference is when it's an analogy, it's got some kind of explanatory point. Let's make it a cracker. Oh, Rebecca, love it, love it, love it, love it. So that's the difference in a nutshell. I've tried to keep it quite simple. A metaphor is saying something is something else. A simile is saying something is like something else. And an analogy is either of those, but with an explanatory point. Apparently, all similes are metaphors, not all metaphors are similes. And you can use metaphor and simile to create an analogy. I bet you're so glad that you came, aren't you? Alrighty, so that's it in a nutshell. I'm going to be blending them together. So whenever I'm talking about magic with metaphors, I mean, they could be analogies, they could be similes, and who really cares? All it is that we're going to be talking about ways that we can get people to think a little bit differently, expand their mind by using something to prompt their thinking. So here's one for you. How could you use a tree? What could you do to bring a tree to life? How could you get people thinking differently by just using a tree? I'm going to give you a starter for 10, and then I'm going to see what comes up for you. You could talk about how you might use a tree or a description of a tree or a picture of a tree, either in coaching or training. But I'm going to be sharing something with you that I've shared with a few people in the Progress Place before, but it actually came up, what day is it? Friday, obviously, on Wednesday this week. So I was working with a client and they were talking about empowerment and how it's really difficult for them to get their head around how that, or where they're empowered to make a decision, when their team are empowered to make a decision, and it was causing all kinds of problems and challenges for them. So I used this, the decision tree. It's something that I've found works really, really well, either with individual managers to use with their team or getting together with teams. So I've used this in team coaching, I've used it on team facilitation, team away days. And ultimately, we get people to think about the different tasks that they might have to make decisions on and how it might apply. So, for example, if something is a really simple decision, we might call it a leaf decision. So if we think about a tree, leaves just drop off at any time, but they don't fundamentally alter the structure of the tree. So it won't kill the tree if you make a leaf decision. So a leaf decision ultimately means just go for it. Anything that is a leaf decision, you are fully empowered to just go ahead and do it. Whereas a branch decision is a little bit meatier. It's something where you could potentially go ahead, make that decision, but let people know afterwards. So it's fairly important. A trunk decision, if you think about the trunk of a tree, now we're starting to get to really the fundamental element of the tree. So if it's a trunk decision, you would likely tell people first before you go ahead and do it. And then a root decision is something that's really, it might be policy related, it might be compliance related, it might be a decision that if you make it, it could kill off the tree. So a root decision, you always discuss it first and then go. And just using this metaphor slash analogy, it really helps people to start to think, well, actually, if I'm going to put £5 on expenses, do I really have to check in with my manager about that? That feels a bit like a leaf decision. Whereas if you're going to sign a multi-million-pound deal, that absolutely feels like a root decision. So here's a couple more for you. Now, what I always carry in my trainer's toolkit is a pack of coaching cards. I know I won't be the only one. Give us a wave if you have coaching cards in your toolkit. Lovely. So you can get them on Amazon. Do you know, I should have an affiliate link for all this stuff. I really don't. I'm not trying to sell anything. So these are Babel cards, and I think they're about £20-25. I really like them because they're nice and thick, so they could withstand an awful lot. But they've got so many really random pictures, but so many lovely ones as well. And one of the, I'm trying to find, there's a particular one with a squirrel and a purple umbrella, which every single time I get these out, somebody will pick. And they'll be talking about, because the squirrel looks quite happy and perky. If I can't find it now, I'll find it when you're in breakout. And it just really gets people thinking about so many different things, either about the fact that it's a tough time at the moment, but I'm still going, or it just brings them joy. And what I love most about these cards is every time I take them onto a training session, coaching session, facilitation session, it brings up something that people weren't either expecting to talk about, or it just helps them to explain a point more differently. If I don't have the cards with me, say if I'm doing a session online, I will usually have these cards on the screen that people can relate to. Purposefully chosen, and so I've got them all from either Free Pick, which I have a subscription to, or you can get them from Pixabay or Unsplash. So just be careful if you're using something that you've got the license to use them. But what I tend to do is get a series of pictures, and sometimes I'll use this at the beginning of the session just to check in with people and ask them how their week's going, or if they're in a frantically busy space at the time, I'll get them to reflect on these pictures and think, how are you feeling at the moment? How would you like to feel? So there's an element of movement in there. It's so much, you get so much more rich information just by sharing those pictures, because it helps people to connect things to something that they might not necessarily have just come out with anyway. So never ceases to amaze me how much you can get out of it. And I know some people often have a bit of nervousness about using pictures, specifically if they're working with clients who are very technical in nature, very black and white. And all I can say is that I've tried it with every single client group you can possibly imagine. And it never ceases to amaze me just how much you get people to open up and describe what's going on for them when you start using pictures. Bryony's asked, how many packs of cards would you usually have with you? Just the one, unless it's a really, really large, unless I'm working with a super large group. But if you're looking at a normal group size of about anything around 12 people, then a normal pack of cards, and I normally spread them all out around the table. Sometimes if you've got no tables, if we're doing something that's just chairs only, spread them all out on the floor, get people just to have a good rummage around. And what I love about them most is the fact that you don't need to have them built in as part of a training session. You can just bring them out anytime you think, actually, we could do with a bit more of a deep dive on the topic that we're talking about, or we could do with a bit of reflection right now. So it's great to get people just to pick something and just reflect on what it is that they've heard so far and what they might want to put into practice. And the cards that I mentioned, Sarah, they're called Babel, these ones. They're nice, sturdy book. I really should have an affiliate link for these, shouldn't I? All right, one more thing for you. This is one that I've used this week as well. Went down an absolute storm. Lynn, you've already mentioned transport. So I love this. What kind of transport best describes your team and why? Sometimes I'll use some pictures just to get people started. What I've noticed, though, is if I use pictures like this, everybody will then come up with water-based transport. So sometimes I'll literally just ask the question, what kind of transport best describes your team and why?